Testing, testing. Good morning. Sure, and welcome to all for our March meeting of the Nelson City Council. I'd like to call on Councillor Paki Paki to begin proceedings this morning with the karakia.
Ai ngā mana i ngā reo, i ngā hau e whā, tihei mairi ora. Ngā rā, tēnā rā koutou, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou i ngā rauranga tira mā, ngā manu heri, nau mai, haramai, ki roto i te poho, o te whare etu nei, e whakatau mai rā, ka tangi au he karakia, te tīmata o te hui o tēnei rā. Mēnā tātou. Te akina te rangi, te akina te hau, te akina te maunga, te akina te awa, te akina te moana, te akina te whai o te ao, te akina papa tuanuku. Au mea ui e, hai, kia mai tātou.
Thanks, Councillor Paki Paki. There, as I understand, no apologies for today's meeting. Give a special welcome to our youth councillor and welcome him to joining any of the proceedings today. On the issue of item 3 and interests, can I just thank all councillors for getting the process wrapped up on the register of interests in which we're required to update them each year, and they are now fully compliant. There, in respect of confirmation of order of business, I'd just like to give councillors this notice. Myself and the Deputy Mayor are due at a local government New Zealand meeting in Wellington this evening with the Ministers of Environment, of Infrastructure, and have a fight at 5 o'clock. So what my plan of attack was going to be was to get through as much as the program as we can by 4 o'clock. If there are still outstanding items, then my intention is to adjourn the agenda until 11 o'clock tomorrow to complete that. And so for planning purposes, both council staff and councillors can count on today's meeting concluding at 4 o'clock, whether the agenda is completed or not. Of course, I'll be most pleased if we can get through what's a pretty challenging agenda today in that timetable. There is no public forum today. We come to the item of the confirmation of minutes from our meeting of the 1st of February. Do councillors have any questions related to those minutes? Is a colleague prepared to move their adoption? Councillor Courtney is moving. A seconder? Councillor Brand? The adoption of the minutes of the 1st of February. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. That is dealt with. We come to the recommendations from the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee on pages 25 to 58 of our agenda, of which the substantive item is the Treasury Management Policy. This is a very substantive item and important, albeit it's been subject to a lot of work. It's one of those areas where if we get it wrong, it can bite us. But again, I'm quite satisfied that it's been well scrutinised. I'm happy to move as a member of the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee the recommendations. Sanson, Councillor Sanson's a member of that. Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Mayor, through the chair. I'm happy to second it, but I think there were some changes sent through I sent some through, and I think Councillor Stallard might have sent some through, minor, and staff had been working on those. So I just wonder, is it possible to have somebody confirm that those have been
I do think it would be appropriate, Mr. Chief Executive, if Nikki were able to come to the table. The other Nikki.
Yes, she was here a second ago.
You're a second ago? And let's just work our way through and see where they are up to. My apologies for it. What we might do, because Nikki Harrison's not there, with Team's indulgence, is to go straight to the presentation by the Civic Trust and then come back to item 6, just because Nikki Harrison's not here. Is there any objection to me taking that course of action? That being the case, I will invite the City of Nelson Civic Trust, Roger and Karen, to present to council. Kia ora, good morning and welcome. Thank you for the work that both you and your trust do for our city, and we look forward to your presentation this morning, Roger and Karen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess all of you recognise this building. It was demolished in many years ago, and it was in Bridge Street. It's where the current courthouse is. As a kid, I grew up and thought, wow, this is awful. It should go. Today, I think, wow, what a disgrace that we pulled it down. However, we did, and we have to move on. The trust, when it was formed, was set up to do several things. The original purpose was so that it could improve the culture of the city, recreation and social life. The original trustees were quite, and I was just talking to Councillor Mel before, the original trustees were Mayor and former Mayor, or former Mayors, Bishop of Nelson and former bishops, MP and former MPs, the town clerk and the chief of police. Those were the guys that would make it work. In 2003, the trust deed was changed to be a more workable situation. You can read those notes there about it. But the trust has gone through the test of time and things do go well. This is the second time that the trust has presented to the council in the last 20 years. So I guess if we were doing a lot wrong, you would have called us in much sooner. That's the current trustees. We're appointed for a 3-year term on the by council on the recommendation of the existing trustees. We meet 2 monthly, normally in this room. Every year when we get our financial returns results out, you guys, when they come out, we take a percentage of the growth and add it to our capital. We have got just over $1 million. It fluctuates a bit these days with the share market, but we've just got over $1 million. But in the last 10 years, we've averaged spending $64,000 a year on projects that we think are useful to Nelson. We've had several bequests over the years. This is our only bit of property, and many of you will have been down there. It's at the bottom of Monaco. It really is a great spot. It's been flooded twice and replanted, but it is a nice spot. Daisy Hale, none of us knew her. She died at 99 and a half years in Nelson. A very sad story. First I heard about her was when I got a note from a local solicitor to say she'd left us $10,000. But her fiance was killed in as a pilot in the Second World War and was killed. So she never married. She lived in Nelson in a council flat, and the lady on the bench seat there knew her and gave us a bit of background about her. I don't think many of you remember this.
Courtney,
No, beyond before. However, the business, Buxton Store business, was around in our lifetime. And in 1961, I think it was sold. And the two remaining children of Francis Hamilton left the city of Nelson a sum of money, sat in your books for a number of years, and in 2013, 378,000 was transferred to the Civic Trust. And that, at the time, nearly doubled our income, our capital. We've done lots of storytelling. We do those in boards, and that's the one on the banks of the Maitai by the Normandy Bridge. This was another one that we did, a bit of a problem with this one. It was put up before the School of Music was altered. After the School of Music was altered, it was moved, and it has not been put back. The School of Music asked us for more money, and we say until it goes back somewhere, we're not giving them no more money. This was an arts project. We get involved in arts and do various things. This one is on the on the 1903 site, and it was done by Mike Mitchell, who lived on Takaka Hill. And when they came to remove it, the trucks, with the weight of that on the back of the truck, got bogged down. But it eventually got to its home. This is an unusual photograph, but it's actually the wall, the windows in the Provincial Museum. The same year that we paid towards that, we also gave 10,000 to the cathedral's stained glass window. This is one of our better projects, getting this flag flight going. First flew in 1986. A number of you will have seen this flag around Nelson. A number of you may have one. I have one down the Sounds on our Halliday house, and the number of people that call in and just say, what's the flag? There's only about 4 cities in New Zealand that have a flag. We have also partnership projects, and this one was Broadgreen Historical House, where we paid for the glass panels that are between the photographer and that door, or sorry, the table, so nobody can get there. And we've done quite a few of these sort of projects. We've just finished the boardroom table and chairs at Melrose, which I believe was the old council table and chairs. This is an awful photograph, but it was scanned out of the newspaper and rather than the original. But the council actually helped us pay for this in 1903 square, and gets used quite regularly. That's a barbecue setup in Victory Square, and we paid a portion of that. But more importantly, we were able to support that by getting them a GST rebate, and that's what we do from time to time. You can see that one there too. We didn't put any money into that, but we were able to use our GST status to get reduced for the people who paid for it. You might recognise the guy on the right there. He was around in those days, and again a poor photograph, but that we paid a lump sum at the beginning when the work was done, and then we gave them a gift every year for the following 5 years. This was one of our better projects, and Mayor Nick probably remembers that. Involved the Settlers Wall. When I look out my window, or Councillor Courtney looks out, you don't see that many people these days, but you do see lots of birds. Our latest project in this area has been cataloguing the Geoffrey C. Wood photographs, and that's still an ongoing job, but it's been a big one. South Street, this was done some years ago, just before I joined the trust. And on the right-hand side there, that building was a car yard. And the day that it was to be sold, the trust bought it on behalf of the council, and it's been developed into that street. When this water fountain was put up, it was the first one of its type in Nelson. At the top, you've got a bottle filling station. In the middle, you've got where you and I would drink from, and in the bottom is where the dogs drink. So it was a good project, but the cost of installing it in that spot was nearly the price of the actual unit. Councillor Noonan was involved in this and got us going. This is not our photograph, this is one up north, but we've got those on the banks of the Maitai, and they're regularly used. We've got lots of lights around Nelson, Queen's Gardens, Cathedral and so on. You recognise that bridge? We would have liked to have done this in colour rather than just a white light, but it was too expensive. This is our caused us most strife. Within days of it being turned on, we had complaints from as far away as Invercargill. There's a long story about that, but it's also for me, my most disappointing project because it doesn't go regularly. That's just another shot of it. This is our best project ever. On the front row is the former mayor and Faith Price, who is a councillor, and her son who developed it. It cost us an arm and a leg. We wanted to get other people involved in it, but no one was prepared to do it, so we did it ourselves. You've all seen that. We've just refurbished that, and that's the storyboard that goes with it. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation, and Roger, particularly thank you for your years of service to the Civic Trust. I know that Councillor Courtney and I would also want to acknowledge the financial contribution that you've made towards the development of the book that we are developing as part of our 150th celebrations, which officially are at the end of this month. Question from Councillor Courtney.
No, I just want to support you, Mayor Nick, in your words and say to Karen and Roger, please take back to the Trust our appreciation for a substantial contribution towards the publication of the book, commemorating the 150th sesquicentennial of the Nelson City Council. And I stress the Nelson City Council, not Nelson. So we really do appreciate, I think about half the cost is going to be met by your Trust. And we are very, very grateful for that. And please thank all the members for that support. We're also grateful to have Kathy Knight as a member of our task force. And she's a very good contributor, a wide knowledge of all matters heritage, and so we're grateful for that as well. But I want to support the Mayor and his words. Thank you.
Any other queries or comments from colleagues? Councillor Rollo.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, and thank you for that wonderful presentation. And when we were going through those photos, I thought they are probably the 10 iconic things that when people come to Nelson for the first time, they talk about. And it's pretty special to know that that the Trust have done them. And I was just going to ask a question. Obviously, people are obviously always excited about new projects that are up and coming. And that is the Trust short of projects at the moment, or have you got a long list of projects you'd like to see happen?
We've always got projects. We're short of money. That's our problem. When I joined the Trust, there was only 300 or 400 grand in it. Now it's up to just over $1 million. But that's our problem. We just need more money so that we can do more. The one thing that we are working on at the moment is a storyboard to go down in Wakefield Quay that will celebrate William Atkinson, who was a councillor and also a city engineer, provincial engineer. So we're working on that at the moment.
Thanks. Again, Roger, just want to totally endorse the remarks from Mel and the wider council of our thank for the work that the Trust does. Looking forward to celebrating that 50 years of the Civic Trust alongside our own City Council 150th and look forward to continuing projects. The one thing just in those last remarks is that there are many Nelsonians who feel passionate about the town. Many of them have left bequests. I just wonder through our Nelson publication whether it might be worthwhile just doing a feature article about how people can leave a bequest to the work of the Civic Trust.
We did that several years ago, but yes, it probably is time. Yes, we'll look at that.
Excellent. Thank you again. Oh, sorry, Councillor Sanson.
Maybe it could just be an annual thing that it's included in our Nelson once a year, a little reminder about the potential to bequest to
Let's
the Civic
explore.
Trust or
That's a good suggestion.
or NCMA, some of those really foundational kind of organisations that are keeping our heritage alive.
Fantastic. Again, thank you both for your ongoing work and keep in touch with us. I now want to revert to item 6.1, the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee report. And if Nikki could just join us at the table, please. There are a few questions on the Treasury Management policy that I want to deal with before we formally adopt it. Okay, Rachel, you had some questions and follow-up suggestions on the policy. Let's just allow a little interaction on that before we advance.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair. Kia ora, Nikki. I think I and possibly Councillor Stallard sent some comments through yesterday, and Catherine LeBeau had liaised with both of us on them, and I just wanted to double check that those changes were incorporated.
So through the chair, yes, I had a number of suggestions from Councillor Sanson and Councillor Stannard around refining some of the, obviously there's a bit of punctuation and things like that. There was a sentence, I've taken on board all the feedback and I'm quite happy to have it incorporated. There was this one sentence in relation to the forestry investment activity. There was a sentence that that we'd sort of got a bit confused about what was actually agreed and or not agreed in the Audit, Risk and Finance. And we were saying, recognising that this is in relation to us transitioning from commercial forestry and transitioning out of commercial forestry. The sentence was recognising that this will be a long-term undertaking in the case that council intends to harvest existing commercial forestry, council will. So that was probably the only change, and it was really quite minor.
That was material. The others were mainly just getting tidy up language.
Exactly. So, I mean, I don't think that changes the intent of what was in there, and Alec and I were both very happy with that.
Quite comfortable with that, Councillor Sanson?
Yep, and really happy to second.
Sure.
that.
So I'm going to move from the chair the adoption of the Treasury Management Policy that's covered on pages numbers there, 58, 25 to 58 of the agenda. It's been seconded by Rachel. That motion is now open for debate. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. That's carried. I now come to my Mayor's report that stands as read. There are a couple of items that have arisen since that I'd just like to mention orally. A number of councillors spoke to me about the deteriorating situation in Palestine. As a general rule, it's my view that foreign policy issues are matters for central government, but it's equally sometimes appropriate for locally elected representatives to express a view. Councillor Rachel Sanson was keen for council in some form to express a view to government. A letter was circulated amongst councillors. I didn't want to have it formally debated because it's not necessary for council to take a position. I simply wish to table the letter that was sent from myself and a group of councillors that supported it, just so that it's on the public record. The second item I want to mention in the Mayor's report is that Councillor Stallard asked me just to report orally on a trip earlier in the year that myself and the Chief Executive did. And if the Deputy Mayor or the Chief Executive wishes to comment on further, would welcome. My view is the most important value that this organisation gets out of LGNZ is just comparing notes with similar organisations and cities. And so myself and the Chief Executive and Rohan went to, in January, to New Plymouth, Wanganui and Palmerston North. Now, I don't want to be like the old uncle and give you the trip highlights. Oh. So
I've slideshow.
The Chief Executive's got a slideshow. Hey, can I just pull a few pieces out, though, that really came through to me? Lots of provincial cities in New Zealand are having an increasing problem, and a very sad but challenging problem, around the issue of homelessness in their CBDs. The usefulness of comparing notes with them is nobody's got magic solutions. I'm very aware that Councillor Anderson is playing his mind about what we might do. It is going to require some innovation. The bit that the takeout for me was that through Local Government New Zealand, similar councils like ours need to connect with government to try and get financial support for dealing with some new innovation in how we deal with that at-risk group. The second message I took from the trip was the importance of waterfront projects. The most impressive was New Plymouth. What New Plymouth has done with their waterfront and with civic art, I found super impressive. But the interesting thing for me was it didn't matter whether it was New Plymouth, Whanganui or Palmerston North. All three of them had invested in their waterfronts. And when we spoke with both their officers and their elected representatives, they all said if there was anything that was a no-brainer that had uniform public support, it was better connecting their cities with either it was their rivers or their waterfronts. The third area, which I think we don't have as bad as some of those, is the amount of vacant first force space in CBDs. In New Plymouth and in Whanganui particularly, but also Palmerston North had to be really innovative about trying to get your retail space on the ground floor, particularly in the older buildings, getting uses for that first floor space for residences or the like. I was quite taken back by the level of vacancies in those cities. And when I've spoken to some in the property sector, actually we don't have a dissimilar issue there, and I think there's some work in that space. A further common issue, Aaron, was around the issue of eyesights. All of those other cities were struggling with what they do with them and were having the same sort of financial problems. I had to say I didn't come away with any easy answers other than actually our problems in common with others. I do think there is a discussion to have with the Minister of Tourism, Matt Ducey, about how we make them a more workable format. In New Plymouth and in Palmerston North, both of their eyesights were either an integrated place in New Plymouth as part of their library or in Palmerston North as part of their Central City Square bus ticketing and information centre combined in together. Certainly I came away with a view you had to do it to make them viable with something else. But that was just simply the challenge. The last part that was useful for me was those councils just like us struggling to read the tea leaves on various aspects of government policy, whether it be over the future of polytechnics, whether it's the direction of city deals and other things. And it was really useful, in my view, to compare notes with those other councils to see what they're doing to be able to advance the best positions. There is nothing further in my report that I wish to comment on. I'm going to give the Chief Executive and the Deputy Mayor the opportunity to comment whether they had any further points from that trip, and then I'll open for questions. Nigel.
Thanks, Nick. And with shortest time, so I won't say much more than what you've already said. I endorse everything you said, but it is extremely useful to compare notes with other councils. We've got some big thinking to do around Three Waters and other things, and it's to share those ideas is really important. And obviously connecting through LGNZ, which you do and I do from time to time, is really important. So those relationships with other councils, we've got problems in common, and it's good to have those conversations.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me was just around often localities see their problems as deeply unique and with solutions that will only work just for them, and actually being able to visit those places and see whilst the problems were not identical and the solutions weren't identical, there were really key themes around strong investment, around considered planning where their projects had been most successful. And I think that those are lessons that we can take, is that we don't need to necessarily build a whole new vehicles for creating change, but actually learning from very similar situations that exist right around this country.
The last point I'd like to comment on my report is simply the recommendation. It has not always been possible to ensure council representation on the Climate Forum between myself and Rohan's diary, thus the recommendation that is on the agenda there. Open for questions. Let's start with Councillor Sanson, then Councillor Brand, then Councillor Courtney.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair. Thanks for the update on the trip, on the visit to the other centres. It was really great to hear. I'm quite familiar with New Plymouth, I have family based there. And I, just reflecting on the value of waterfronts and developing waterfronts, I'm wondering if there might be an opportunity for us to, as a council, to submit on the draft GPS on land transport regarding the dropping of the investment in the Rocks Road upgrade, just because I know that it is possibly seen as mostly just a kind of an active transport upgrade, but my understanding is that it's also about increasing the resilience of that critical corridor, but enhancing the appeal of the waterfront and the usability and the accessibility for all users. I think I cycled back around there recently, and there was an older fellow, an elderly gentleman, in his mobility scooter on the road in the traffic because there was just no space for him on the footpath. It was so distressing. I was super concerned about him with, you know, big logging trucks and stuff going by. And I think it's really important that we, you know, try and advocate to central government around how important this is to Nelson. It's been 30 years of community advocacy and council work to get it on the cards. So
The project around that Rocksfront waterfront, my difficulty is it was promised in 2017 by the previous government. There's been no design work. There's no budget. There's been no consenting. My view is any construction in that coastal zone, reminded by the rockfall that's occurred this week, is incredibly difficult. And so I don't like to raise community expectations when I know how hard it is. I think the right way forward on that one is that the government's GPS on transport was just released in draft form this week. I think we're going to need to have a council workshop as we have the opportunity through the Joint Regional Transport Committee with Tasman to make our submissions on that. And that's not the only issue in the GPS. So fair to raise it, but I think the right format for it will be for us to do a workshop as we develop our submission on the government's draft GPS. The next person was Councillor Brandt on the Mayor's report.
Thank you, through the Mayor.
And I should have highlighted your good work as Mayor for a week.
Thanks. I just want to, thank you for explaining the trip and putting into context that it was about information gathering to help with the City Centre Summit. That certainly put things into context for me. I want to raise two things about your report. The first one is actually about the opportunity to be acting mayor, and I just want to thank my friends, colleagues and the public for the support over that time, and a big thanks of appreciation to Cherie and Phoebe, who actually are in the mayor's office, and they made it absolutely thoroughly enjoyable and completely on task, and I appreciate all the hard work that they do, and I think it's a true asset that we have people like that working for the council. My other query on the report is actually about the fluoridation. My question is regarding the two letters and the phrasing in the letters. I just want to come back to, because in 3.7 of your report, it talks about granted an extension to Nelson City Council to fluoridate its water supply to the 31st of December, hoping for certainty by that time that we reach the new deadline. And then we're aware that there's a judicial review that will hopefully conclude by that time. But in the letter, 15th of February of the Mayor, and then also the letter by Dr. Diana Safati on the 22nd of February.
Yes.
I'm just a bit concerned about the wording, because it talks about, and both letters insinuate, that the fluoridation will still happen by the extension of 31st December, and that it insinuates that this is only to remove the legal challenge that may happen. So I'm sort of concerned that we are only delaying due to get the legal challenge removed, and that the directive will still go ahead by the 31st of December, or have I misunderstood, and that if the directive is overturned and seen as an error of law, that Nelson City Council will not continue with processing to add fluoridation to our water system? it's not clear with the insinuations of the
Sure. Well, the first thing is the date of the 31st of December was a decision by the Director General of Health and as an extension. Now, the important issue here is about compliance with the law and the decisions of the courts. If the court last year had overruled the directive, we would be in a different sense. But what the court ruled the Director General of Health is not to overturn it, but to ask the Director General of Health to reconsider it in light of the process. Now, I tell you what, I don't want our council getting into the business of doing the job of the court. All we're saying here is I wrote to the DG and said, hey, look, this time frame's getting really tight. Can you please tell us what's going on? Because I'm getting nervous. And the worst case scenario for me would be to have the largest council that's required to fluoridate since the High Court ruling, us going ahead and then us getting dragged into the court and spending vast sums of ratepayers' money caught up in a legal scramble. So my purpose of my letter was to get clarity from the Director General, and the Director General has said, look, there were further guidance provided by the court in last month, and they're now going to work through that process. But the simple position is this. The council will not proceed with the fluoridation of water against the directives of the courts of New Zealand. That's the position we must be in. But equally, we will comply by the law. And I just think that regardless of your views on these questions, the onus is even greater on lawmakers and by lawmakers, which we are, to be respectful of that legal process. And that was the intent of the correspondence.
Okay, so just to clarify, the position of the 31st of December is if the directive is overturned, we will not be following through because the law has then stipulated it is not a directive and we're not required to. But if the directive is not overturned and it was only to get its ducks in order because an error of law had occurred in the process, we will continue.
Correct. And to some degree, I can't answer the questions of the Director General of Health. All I can do is to say as Mayor, I can only ask. I felt the responsible thing to do was to ask, well, what's going on here? These timelines are getting very tight. And the Director General has simply extended her deadline. The worst case scenario for the Nelson City Council was it being in a position of risk of very substantive fines for not compliance with the original order on 30th of April, but at risk of being out of line with the High Court. And so in my view, it's good that we've got clarity, and actually it's something the Director General has to sort out with the direction that's been provided by the High Court. And obviously in granting the extension to the 31st of December, I'm assuming she has confidence that she can resolve the issues by then. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you for that. You've covered a few controversial topics, but I understand the position you're in on this. I would have liked to have seen that maybe it's an opportunity for us to take stock before saying we're delaying the inevitable, if it's inevitable. Obviously, this is going to create a bit of division on the community. And since the previous decision of the previous government to fluoridate, landscape has changed. We now still own our own water, and many of the public still see that as something we should be looking after. So without getting into a debate whether one should fluoridate or not, I would really ask that letter be, or the Mayor's report really indicate that we need to take stock and wait for a decision rather than basically saying, oh, we're going to go ahead because we believe the inevitable is happening. The community, I think, have a bit of a different view, whether they're for or against. It is our water supply, and I think they'd like to see us as a council, as governance of their water supply, say, well, there's been some sort of change in view from the government, an error legally in what was a previous directive that we were under. This has changed. The ball is back in our court to some degree until that decision is confirmed one way or the other, rather than the sort of second to last or third to last paragraphs stating the pros of fluoridation. I think that should be left out.
The bit that I would question is the statement that says the ball is back in our court. Regardless of the ownership of the water supply, the amendments that were made to the law in 2021 make it absolutely plain that the decision to fluoridate water supplies or not rests with the Director General of Health. And I just don't want to create any expectation that it's a decision that we get to make. There are only two ways in which the position will change, and that is either as consequence of a direction of the High Court or if Parliament agrees to amend the law.
Should we wait? I think we should wait till then, take stock and wait till then rather than preempt what we are going to do on that, because I think this is going to be quite a controversial topic, and I think you've waded into some controversy there. I won't debate that any further. I just put my point across. It's your mayor's report. I respect that. The other item is you saying you're tabling the protest letter in regards to the conflict between Israel and Hamas. I know I've spoken to you personally and emailed you in regards to my concern about us waiting into that as well as a council governing the operation of the city. I think we're wading into, once again, a controversial topic and an international topic, which is really central government and people to do in their own time, whether protesting one way or the other. So I am concerned about that because A, it causes division by those viewing those who should or shouldn't have signed it, and B, once again, it's sending something which we're claiming to represent our city on it, and I think you'll find there's quite a bit of view on that controversial topic, a topic that we shouldn't be naively believing we understand fully either. I understand the concerns of such conflict happening and the human and moral portion of that. But once again, I think that's a central government representing us on that, not us as local government.
I think on the question of the conflict in Gaza, the council is not taking a position. Let me be very clear about that. But what I have done is written a letter, and a number of councillors have chosen to attach their name to the letter that was drafted up, and some have not, and that is entirely appropriate. I think, and people who will read the letter will see that it is a very moderate letter. It is my view that this community has long had strong views of being advocates for peace. And I would not want people, as a consequence of the question from Councillor Skinner, to assume that Nelson or those that signed the letter are taking a side on that conflict other than wanting peace and an end to the bloodshed.
I commend you on moderating the original letter, and the second letter is far more palatable, but I still think that's something, making it aware publicly, I think that was something that is for individuals to write such a letter, not to be under council letterhead. Thank you.
Understand, and that is why my preference was simply for councillors individually to make the choice. And I totally respect those that made the choice not to include their name on the letter. Councillor Rollo, any other questions on the mayor's report?
Thanks, Mayor Nick. I've got two, and the first one is they're on two different topics, so I'll ask them one by one. The first one is on the fluoridation of the water, and obviously we were going to be starting this process earlier in the year than we are now. Did council have a bit of a letter prepared to go out to all residents stating that this change was coming to their water, and letting know all, because it's a huge change what we're that's getting proposed here? Was a letter going to every household explaining that this change was coming?
No, and I wouldn't expect them to. And the reason is it would be a very inefficient way to communicate, in that every letter in the mailbox is about $1 to send 28,000 letters out. More than happy to put notices in the paper, more than happy to communicate. But the idea of writing to everybody, I don't think would be an efficient means to communicate. It's finally up to the chief executive to work that out, but that would not be my expectation. The second thing is, look, I know there are huge passions about the issue of fluoridation. The council simply has to comply with the law. And because Parliament has taken that decision away from us, then I would, I'm not of a view that we should be wading into that argument other than complying with the law. I think it's a very difficult position if any councillors want to argue that we should not comply with the law and the directions of the courts.
I wouldn't, not going to debate it and say that we're arguing with the law. I just thought as representatives of the citizens, it would only be appropriate to send a letter. We send a letter if we're closing a road for a day. If we're changing the way someone's going to have their water, I would expect it was the duty of the council to send a letter, even if it does cost $1. But look, it's question time, not debate time, so I'll just leave it there.
Sure. I think just on terms of the difference of where there's a road closure, where there are a very small number of property owners that are affected differently, the most effective means, and ultimately rests with the chief executive, is how to communicate with the residents. And you've got 30 people that are affected by a road closure because there's some roadworks. Yes, the letter is the most effective way to communicate. When you've got something that's occurring citywide, I'm just not sure the letter is the most efficient way of doing it. I take on board the views that you and others have expressed about the comps. How do we explain to the public what's going on? One of the reasons for including the information in my mayor's report was to let the public know what's going on around the issue of fluoridation. Councillor Paki, and then Courtney.
Kia ora, Mr. Mayor. Just wondering, just on the practical side of things, how prepared is the council? What is it going to cost, in terms of preparation to be able to actually implement it? And if it doesn't go ahead, what is it going to, so I guess the question is, how late can we leave it before we invest in what's required, and how much does that cost if we are forced to do this, if this is a requirement? And what is it that we can do to mitigate if the decision does go the other way, to try and limit those costs to the community?
My understanding is that the government is paying the council's full cost of the implementation of the fluoridation. My expectation, to be quite direct, is that if the government is unsuccessful in its court case and fluoridation does not proceed, I would still expect the government to fully refund any costs that Alec and the infrastructure team have incurred. Alec, do you wish to add anything to that in terms of Councillor Paki's question about the estimate of what those costs are?
Through yourself, Nick, I can't recall the exact costs. I'll look them up. But in terms of what Mayor Nick has said, we are getting paid and reimbursed by central government for the work that we are doing to give effect to this, for the capital works, that is.
Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. In your verbal report, which I appreciated on your trip north and discussions with other mayors in the various areas that you visited, you've preempted me. And I now want to raise with you you said first floor spaces being converted in these areas, these cities and regions, having challenges, and we don't have them here. Well, I'd like to say, yes, we do, because people are not taking up that initiative to the extent that we would like. And I'm very close to approaching Councillor Sanson and her very active task force, housing task force, and telling her an area that we need to look at, and that's development contributions. Because for people who want to do these conversions, that's the fence, that's the barrier they've got to climb over, and it's a financial barrier. And one I'm dealing with at the moment is a 4-bedroom house. Families left. The remainder want to move upstairs and convert down below to a 2-bedroom apartment, a flat. Same space, no extension to the house or anything. Something close to 28,000 development contributions, but they are getting a 25% discount, and that brings it down to 22,500. The incentive has been sucked right out of them. And I would suggest that the same is happening above our properties in the central city. And this is serious, Mayor Nick, because this was going to be something that would help them establish themselves when they retire. So they don't mind paying architects, they don't mind paying all the resource consents and that sort of thing, but I'm talking about, and they're talking about, development contributions that are huge. Can we have a close look at that through our task force ably headed by Councillor Sanson, please?
Firstly, in response to your question, if I didn't word it quite correctly in my oral report, here's the way I'd re-express it, Councillor Courtney. the scale of vacancies in first floor central city buildings was particularly acute in those other North Island cities. It's not as bad here, but we have the same problem. If there was a takeout for me from the visit, it is that for the conversion of first floor space in the CBD to residential purposes, I'm not sure our rules nationally and our building code make it that doable. It tends to be very, very expensive. And what we discussed with the other mayors was whether a case could be made to government for some refinement to make that more doable. I'm more than happy for Councillor Sanson and the task force to have a bit of a look at that issue. I'd also hope in the dialogue...
Excuse me, man, not a bit of a look. Not a bit of a look. This is people's homes, roofs over their heads, it's security. It's incredibly important for people that are trying to find housing accommodation in this city. Not a bit of a look. I will expect Councillor Sanson in a normal manner to be thoroughly in depth about it.
I'll let her accept the challenge. The last point I was going to make is that I have at the summit that we're planning later this month, it will be good to engage with some of those property owners about what the practical difficulties are in getting residential use of some of those vacant first floor spaces within our city. But I'll allow Councillor Sanson responds, albeit we are stretching the bounds of the Mayor's report and the Deputy Mayor is giving me dirty looks about my chairing.
Thanks very much. So just really quickly to respond, I happily take up Councillor Courtney's challenge, particularly where it's in terms of partitioning existing homes. My understanding though, and maybe officers can confirm this or otherwise, is that development contributions for any residential development in the city centre are already exempt. So there are no development contributions for any residential development in the city centre. That's my understanding. So we've already, and that's been in place for a number of years.
Thanks, Councillor Sanson. Councillor Anderson.
Yes, thank you, me, Nick, through the chair. I really appreciate the verbal report, and I don't want to create work or read another report, but I'd imagine there'd be a lot of really valuable information you guys got on your recce run, and a lot of it sits in your brains. And possibly, you know, if I knew exactly what you're doing, because I know there's lots of amazing things happening in the places you went to, and being able to forward some questions or possibly ask you to pass on business cards that would have been quite helpful. So, yeah, I guess talking to you guys about what you learned, but there's 3 of you that would have all gathered all this amazing information, which possibly we're not all going to benefit from.
I think a good way forward would be a number of you have responsibilities in particular areas. So I'd love to have a chat with you, some of the stuff specifically on the vulnerable housing stuff. And there are other colleagues, some of the playground stuff that I saw was quite impressive, James. And so I think the challenge for the 3 of us would be to make sure that we pass on that information that's relevant to councillors' particular responsibilities. Good point. I'd like to wrap up the Mayor's report at that point. If there are no further questions, I'm going to move from the chair its adoption resolutions 1 and 2, seek a seconder, and then open it to debate. Deputy Mayor is happy to second. Is there any debate on the Mayor's report and the resolutions? That being the case, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. We come to item 9, the Waimea Inlet Management Strategy and Action Plan. I invite Scott and Mandy before the committee, before council. Okay, welcome before the committee, Mandy, with you and your team. Thank you for the work that's gone into the Waimea Inlet Strategy with our neighbours in Tasman. Look forward to the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So with me, I have Scott Butcher, who is from our Science Environment team, and this is Sky Davies, who's with the Tasman Environment Trust. So I'll hand over to Scott to introduce the report.
Kia ora, elected members and council staff. Yes, so as Mandy has mentioned, I'm Scott Butcher. I'm an environmental programs advisor with the Science and Environment team. I am the council, I guess you would say, sort of focal person, focal officer on the Waimea Inlet Coordination Group. And I guess the key thing to think about here is the Waimea Inlet Strategy and Action Plan acts as an effective framework for a broad range of environmental actions to protect and enhance the nationally and internationally important Waimea inlets. From my experience as a council officer on the coordination group, I can attest to the effectiveness of the former strategy, and it guides discussion and influences actions amongst the wide array of groups that are part of the coordination group. The report you see in front of you is the revised management strategy 2050 and action plan 2023 to 2026 that we're seeking support from this council for. And I'll just pass over to Sky for a couple of additional comments.
Kia ora koutou, ko Sky Davies taku ingoa. I am the General Manager of Tasman Environmental Trust and was elected co-chair of the Waimea Inlet Working Group last year alongside an iwi representative. And I'm here just to support on behalf of the wider community the importance of the Waimea Inlet strategy. The main points I wanted to make really are that there's very strong community support for this strategy, and that the strategy has allowed a level of alignment between all of the parties, councils plus community and DOC involved as well, that creates, I would say, incredible bang for buck. So what I'd say that this is a really excellent example of a collaborative framework in our region, the strategy has created a clear plan that opens opportunities for the community to come on board and align around some clear objectives. Just very quickly wanted to mention some of the achievements that have that we've worked together on over the years. More than 250,000 native plants have been planted around the estuary in the last 8 years. And this has created a strong sense of community investment. So a lot of those plants have been through volunteer planting days. We've had thousands of volunteer hours, over 25,000 volunteer hours input into this work. And we've also got extensive trapping and predator control around the inlet, 58 kilometres of trap line, over 1,000 traps from Mapua to the Honest Lawyer. Having a plan like this with some clear objectives has also meant that we've been able to bring in over $3 million of investment from outside the region to help achieve these common goals. Together, we've set some really ambitious targets that we've managed to overachieve on. One of the goals was increasing by 10 kilometres the area of estuary margin in natural vegetation by 2030. And actually by 2023, we'd achieved 17 kilometres. So we'd really, by setting this goal and having everybody come along, invest in that, that's councils and community alike, we've managed to overachieve on that. So I'm just wanting to offer this and express that from a community perspective, this strategy provides a really good framework that allows us all to collaborate and achieve more together. Thank you.
Okay, questions from colleagues. We'll start with Councillor Pakipaki.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was just going to propose that I'm quite happy to move this.
Oh, okay. That's very, very much appreciated. I'll just get the questions through and then we'll take that, but very helpful. Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, through the chair. I'm happy to second, and mine's a comment really, if that's possible, rather than a question. I was going to ask about funding, but Sky very helpfully told us it was 3 million. I just really wanted to affirm what an effective kind of collaboration this has been. There's been a high level of iwi engagement, and broad community group engagement and councils, and I think it's incredibly good value for the time invested, and I think that the outcomes speak for themselves. So I just really want to thank everybody involved, and the staff, and Sky, and all of the others, iwi representatives and the community groups involved. It's really an impressive piece of work, and feel really hopeful about the future of the Waimea Inlet because of it.
Thank you. Councillor Brand.
I just want to provide some feedback that I got from some of the volunteers directly. They love being involved in this project. They absolutely love the work that's going on, and they look forward to getting stuck in and doing more. So keep it up, and I think it's a great area that both councils are working together.
Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Bench.
Thank you. A couple of questions from me, which is overall in terms of the inlet's health. What would you describe the broad trend of the past decade to be? Are we getting worse, flatlining, improving?
On that, or we can get Paul or Harry. You guys want to talk about? Yeah. So if it's okay, we'll get one of our specialists, the coastal scientists. So Harry Allen.
It's a good question. It's always good when we're doing these strategy documents to get that feel, and they're free and frank.
Yeah. Cool.
So just trying to get a broad understanding over the last decade, ecological health, overall coastal health, getting better, static, getting worse.
Yeah, a very broad question. It depends on the areas you're looking at. Waimea Inlet's generally seen as quite a healthy estuary, up there among some of the more pristine of the 4 estuaries in Nelson's CMA. There have been some serious pressures in the monitoring period of 1990 to 2020. There was a roughly 60% decrease in seagrass area coverage. Very important habitat for some key fishery species, snapper, kahawai, flounder, species like that. So there are pressures. A 20% decrease in salt marsh area from 1946 to 2020. But in that time frame, there have also been improvements. So the period from 1999 to 2020, we saw a growth in that seagrass margin, salt marsh margin, and this project will really help bolster that area, which is a key ecological environment within the estuary. So a mixed bag, but overall, Waimea is a healthy estuary. A key pressure is the input of mud, some of which is beyond our control. It's from the Motueka River, and it really requires that alignment between TDC and NCC to address that as a pressure. So mixed bag, there are ongoing serious pressures, but it's an estuary that we need to protect. It's still got a lot of value to it.
Yes, good question and a really good answer. It's up.
Supplementary, which is really the sort of impetus of the question is around on page 101. Let me say, I love this strategy and action plan. I think that it's brilliant. Is by 1st of January 2025, work with landowners to ensure contaminant loads do not exceed the assimilative capacity of the inlet. How much work is that to actually achieve? If we know that fine sediment and mud is one of the biggest contributors to poor health of the estuary, how much work are we going to have to put in to actually achieve that by the 1st of January? And when we say we're resourced, are we resourced to do what we've been doing in that space, or are we resourced to really step up our compliance there?
Could you add something on that, Harry, or was that more of a Paul Fisher question? Might be river settlement was. Yeah, if possible, Paul Fisher might be able to provide more detail on that one. Thank you.
I'll swap out.
Thanks, Harry.
Thanks, Scott, for the I guess so from a freshwater perspective, there are downstream effects, obviously, and so in terms of actually trying to improve the actually sediment loads, it is important that we actually try and stabilise the hillsides more. And also in terms of actual planting along the streams, really critical as well, which is lacking in a lot of Stoke streams. But in terms of the I'm actually working with sort of landowners and so on. We sort of have a catchment team, which has 5 staff in there, and in terms of the timeframes at the moment, the plan is to actually set up a sort of catchment plans in the next 2 years. So there is a plan in place, but it is going to be a challenge for sure. Yeah.
Just to tease out that, because it is a joint catchment between Nelson and Tasman, are those negative impacts of the mud that's impacting through coming more from the urban parts of the catchment, of which Nelson City is the regulator of, or from the rural areas? Which ones are having greater impacts on the questions and the issues that the Deputy Mayor's highlighted?
Certainly. So yeah, in terms of the sort of eastern sort of part of the estuary, those impacts are coming from the Stoke streams, from the Stoke stream. Sorry. So in particular, Orphanage stream, and also Portman stream, which in the upper catchments as a mix of both forestry and urban development going on.
Councillor Benj.
Thank you. This is wonderful work. Those margins are virtually the heartbeat of our planet. It's wonderful to see pied stilts back. They were very much part of my upbringing. They were everywhere, and they've turned up again. It's fantastic. But I've got a couple of questions. The first one is, I see people collecting watercress a lot in those rivers that flow in, and they're bunching it up and selling it. So the question is, the watercress might be out of your scope, but the shellfish and the fish, are they safe to eat?
Through the chair. So for the first question, in terms of watercress, as you actually know, it doesn't. In terms of contaminants, it does actually actually store contaminants. So in an urban area, it's not actually safe to eat. And so in the past, when the councils find out that that's been sold at the market, that's been actions taken to actually basically stop that practice. But in terms of actually people going out and picking watercress, it's difficult to really sort of manage that. In terms of shellfish, with sort of stormwater contamination, that does impact on shellfish, and there actually is an actual ban on collecting shellfish in the Nelson area because of stormwater contamination. And in terms of signage, there's signage out there to basically explain that as well.
And fish.
Well,
flounder.
Are the shellfish and flounder are other species that are caught recreationally quite safe to eat in the estuary, is the short and sharp, I think, of what Councillor Benj is seeking.
In terms of shellfish, no. But in terms of fish, I would say yes. Yeah, there are.
And the seagrass, decline in seagrass, is that from turbidity or just mud? Because you picked out Poor Man's and Orphanage.
Yeah.
Which I point out, Mr. Mayor, that they're completely under council control.
Yeah.
And yet on the scale of degradedness, they are the worst. They're at the absolute bottom of the scale.
Yeah, in terms of seagrass, I might pass that on to my colleague Harry, but certainly stresses like actually sea temperature increases, and also there are actual fungal diseases that the seagrass can catch, which can impact it considerably. Harry?
Yeah.
Diseases usually come when something's already struggling.
Yeah, sediment impacts are major for seagrass, whether it's turbidity, like you said, smothering the light that can reach them, which they need just like any other plant, or pure smothering through mud impacts. So post the floods, a lot of the seagrass beds had to bounce back from that influx of storm-driven mud, just covering them up. A lot of them have recovered, but there was a definite knock there. So the fine sediments being transported by rivers are a key driver of their health, but there's also long-term resuspension of old sediment. So some of the major impacts that I'm talking about in that 60% decline, they took place decades ago with the development of the land for orchards. So some of it is historical damage that we're now seeing recovery from. So management of sediment transported by streams is a huge driver, but some of it is the resuspension of historic sediment sources. And anything we can do now to help the health of the seagrass beds just means they're better equipped to deal with it naturally.
Okay. Thank you.
My question was for Scott, and that is, are we sure that the timetable with other parts of council, like the business unit, can meet the timetables in the strategy?
Okay, so so I went through fairly extensive consultation internally with a number of managers, a number of staff members within council around the actions. So I think one of the answers to that is that if there's any concerns with some of those timeframes being too tight, then we need to take that back to the coordination group potentially. And we do have the capacity to change timelines. Oftentimes we'll have the coordination group will get together and discuss whether any of those actions are actually achievable within those timeframes. And we do collectively discuss whether we need to actually shift or change some of those timelines on those actions if they're not achievable.
Thank you. Now it's been moved. Councillor Anderson, questions, and then I'm going to allow Councillor Pakipaki and Sanson to move and second the room.
Yeah, thanks. And I just echo Councillor Brown's comment. I do lots of volunteering with my kids. It's great. Yeah. So I know that you work with Youth, Forest and Bird and Whenua Iti. I'm just wondering, I've been to some Enviro School stuff, and I know schools love having projects and local context, and also I've been talking to the college about their volunteer clubs. And do you engage at all with the local schools or Enviro School?
Yes, correct, we do. The Whakatu Drive restoration plantings, many of those plants have gone in through school groups participating in plantings for that area. We have been investigating other opportunities to get volunteers out and do additional plantings, but absolutely, if there's an option there, an opportunity there, we do bring local schools in, and that's through the Enviro Schools coordinator that we deal with internally within council.
Okay, I'm taking it that Councillor Pakipaki is happy to move. Councillor Sanson happy to second. The resolutions before Council 1, 2 and 3 on the strategy are there open for debate. If I was just to make some comments from the chair, I'd endorse those of other councillors, and that is having our two councils, particularly the Environment Trust and iwi working together on these challenges, and the area being pretty special, and a strong encourager of the work that is there for a pretty treasured tainga within the region. So quite comfortable, always interested in the practicalities of meeting those timelines. Some of them look a bit ambitious to me, but we'll see how you go. Any other comments? That being the case, did the mover or second wish to make comment before I put the resolutions? Councillor Pakipaki.
Ai ka pai, ka haere ki te tūru. Tēnā tātou. This is quite exciting. First of all, I just wanted to commend the work that's being done by all of the agencies. I think it really hasn't been sort of illustrated how many people are involved in this, especially through the TDC and the other agencies, DOC and Game and Wildlife, all the stakeholders, the landowners, the people, and me myself. I'm a practitioner of mahi ngā kai, so I have a very strong interest in this. Also wanted to thank you. I've had really good feedback from iwi in terms of your engagement. It's a good sign that things are starting to get better in that space, where normally we've charged ahead and left them behind, where they have a really important say in matters like this. So I just explain my interest in this. I'm also on the joint committee for the Nelson Tasman Sewage Business Unit. So these two things are very well connected, and I hope that we can get some sort of collaboration and working, especially for our long term. This is a long term plan. Even though I also want to acknowledge that there is at this stage, the line that you've drawn in the sand, so to speak, no pun intended, with the targets that you've got. Are commendable. It's really good that we're really setting goals, that they are short. I acknowledge the mayor has said that whether or not questioned what is achievable, and I think that's also healthy as well. So I want to say to Harry, ka pai bro, your pronunciation and the correct way of saying kahawai shows that you're actually, you know what you're talking about. So toi tū te reo. So where we go to from here, there's a lot of work to do, and I really encourage the notion of the organisations that are involved to keep that spirit up. It is a really long game, and from my point of view and iwi's point of view, it is an intergenerational approach. We really need to get it to the stage where, as Councillor Benj sort of highlighted, is that this was a mahi ngā kai. Mahi ngā kai is our traditional food gathering places, and activities are involved in that area. So it's really important. This is a massive asset for our region. The temperature, the thermometer for our region's health is measured in our estuaries and in our waterways. So if we can do something to extend that beyond and make sure that the targets are achieved and continue, that we keep on upping our game. So ngā mihi nui kia koutou, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thanks, Councillor Pakipaki. The motion's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary say no. The report is adopted, as is my tradition on the hour to have a break. Council will resume at 10:25 on the Te Huna Nui challenges. Councillor Gent. the challenging problem we have at Tahuna Beach with the contamination of an area of the beach. I welcome Andrew and Hannah to present the report. And I do want to say in opening both the report and the work that the council team has done on this has been nothing less than exceptional. I've seen a few of these. They are very challenging, difficult problems. And I have been hugely encouraged by both the pace and the quality of work that our staff working on this have done, but we're not out of the woods yet.
Thank you, Mayor Nick, and thank you very much for the kind comments. We've been doing our best for sure. So just quickly, briefly introduce the team who we've got here. Not really expecting that we'll get into particularly detailed questions, but just in case we do. We have Paul Walker from Tonkin and Taylor online. We have Nathan Clark from who's the general manager or group manager of regional operations from our regional sewage, landfills and sewage business unit. If there are any questions about landfill, we have staff from our projects office here. So they're the people who are actually managing the planning and potentially implementation work if council decides that it does want to proceed with implementation. And of course, Hannah, who's our business owner for this project. So I'll hand over to Hannah to introduce the report and then we can take any questions. Thank you.
Kia ora councillors and kia ora Mayor Nick, thank you for the shout out. It has been quite a complex project and I want to acknowledge Ajith and the projects team for all of his hard mahi he's put in here. I will take this report as read and we're open to questions.
Thank you. Open to colleagues. Start with Councillor Rainey.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. I just want to foreshadow an amendment, which I'm not quite sure what it's going to be until I've heard a little bit more from staff. But my concern being, if I can articulate what I'm talking about, it may help get some kind of answer from staff. My concern is that under the suite of recommendations we've got here, that recommendation 4 suggests we establish a smaller alternative car park at the site for an estimated cost of 5.8 million. My concern being that, and I realise this is complex and there's a whole range of issues surrounding where we're finally going to end up with a car park down there, but my concern is that essentially pulling that car park right back down and away from the beach with a long pathway going down to that point is going to really curtail the activity of our kite surfers and our foilers. We know that this is one of the preeminent sites for kite surfing and foiling in New Zealand. And I'm concerned that this is going to have a dramatic effect on that activity, and would like to know whether there's some kind of compromise scenario that we could look at between reinstating the car park in its current position, which I realise there's challenges due to managed retreat, and what is suggested in the recommendations that we have. So I'd be interested to get some comment from staff.
Would welcome. I think it's an important issue to have a discussion on, and I think it would be worth Hannah giving a bit of an oversight of roughly the number of car parks that are present there at the moment, under the recommended proposal, how many car parks there are there, and I also think any oversight around the issues that Councillor Rainey's raised with the engagement with the key groups that have been wanting to use that area of the beach.
Yes, through you, Mayor Nick. It's certainly a pertinent issue, and the sort of overshadowing problem that we're facing, apart from the contamination, is that we've currently got approximately 20 car parks there, and the proposed smaller gravel car park, which is still relatively close, will be 10 to 15. So it certainly is a drop in car parking. We have engaged with, we've done a lot of engagement, and in particular with the wind sports fraternity and kite school have been very involved, and indicated that it certainly would be problematic to them to lose car parks, and they are opposed to the loss of car parks. However, we have provided a logical solution, but there will be a loss.
I think the part for me with it is being realistic about the fact that the sea is effectively eroding away at about 3.8 metres per year. And so it seems quite logical, the recommendation that's come from our staff and consultants, to locate the car park so that we get the longest period of use out of it. Don't want to spend a lot of money on a car park, letting it be eroded away in the next year or two. And I do think we need to be realistic that the expectation is that that foreshore will continue to equate. The only question following on from Pete, would it be possible to get a few in the option 5? You've said we're 10 to 15. We previously had 20. Is there any way in the option 5 location that you could seal it and mark it out as 20? I do find with car parking where there's no markings, people are all over the place. You can get a greater efficiency if you mark the sites. And I do have sympathy for the kite surface and having a good location for which to launch from. So are there any options for us in that space, Hannah? And if our consultants wish to comment, welcome their input as well.
Yeah, I'd invite you, Paul, if you'd like to comment.
Good morning. As to the sealing of the car park, and I don't really have a view on that. I guess that's a matter for council to consider in terms of the cost. But I would just echo what has been said so far in terms of the drivers for the choosing that alternative car park location with respect to the continued erosion and the movement of the blind channel towards the spit.
Is there any potential, can I tease it a bit further, to address the concerns of the groups? And Pete, is there any potential to get a greater number of car parks in the option 5 proposal?
It's certainly quite a tight space. However, it's something we can certainly investigate, but we haven't identified a large enough area for, I think, 20 car parks in the current location.
Through you, man, Nick, I think we can go away and we can have another talk about that, because I think it is a significant issue for some users. So we'll put our thinking caps on and see what we can come up with. With the car park as it is, Councillor Stallard did ask some questions earlier in the week, and one of his questions was around, if you don't mind me, Councillor Stallard, one of his questions was around, with this car park, how long would we expect this car park to exist? And we weren't sure of the answer of that, but we did suggest it could be 10 to 15 years. So if we move closer to the coast with the car park, then we're looking at a shorter period than 10 to 15 years. So that's something.
And I think that's a bit of the trade-off. Pete, you had a further question.
Well, just on that one, if I could, I mean, I guess the devil will be in the detail in terms of what we actually end up designing here. And we've just got a picture on page 152 of our agenda, which is a rough drawing of where the potential car parks could go. One of my queries is the difference between a $5.8 million budget and a $6.1 something or other dollar budget in terms of the percentage. It's not a huge difference in terms of trying to put in place something that was going to achieve as many options as possible. Is there some flexibility, like if we're looking at page 152 on our agenda now, which indeed is the diagram showing option 6 car park and option 5 car park, is there some flexibility on how far option 5 car park actually goes towards the north, so to speak, in terms of trying to... Is this a response to the land as it presents itself at the moment? Or is to go further going to be even more expensive? Given that I do understand that after a period of time, the sea will come right to the car parks anyway.
It's something we can certainly look into. It's also about loss of trees in the area, because there is quite a lot of greenery around there, and obviously we destabilise further by removing more vegetation. So we certainly factored that into it when we were trying to find the right area for this car parking, but we can certainly investigate further, and we have no appetite to remove parking for the winter sports. We'd be happy to look into it further.
I think where I'm at, and really want to take direction from council, is I'm reluctant to move from option 5 to option 6 for the reasons of the coastal erosion. Is that put that level of investment when we know the area is subject, but asking our council officers to try and maximise within the practical limits the amount of car parking within option 5 seems to me but the best way in which we might be able to accommodate Councillor Rainey's concerns. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Medic. And firstly, just to acknowledge the amount of work that's gone into this. I know I've kind of been on the back seat, Councillor Rollo, the Mayor, and obviously staff have put a lot of work into engaging with the community on this. Has a hybrid option of option 3 and option 5, both of which were the two kind of recommended for further consideration, where we have a smaller car park at the front, but we also build that larger secondary car park. I'm really conscious that we're willing to invest money in parking in the CBD, but this is an area that's always full of people. It's not just the water sports, it's also dog walkers and people for recreation. It's pretty much always full, especially on a good day. Is that something that's been looked into? Are there any kind of practical considerations for that?
We do have overflow parking opposite the roller skating rink, the grassed area, which you'll notice is sometimes chained off and sometimes is not. So there's certainly options to look at how accessible we can make that area. As we're still in the process of the Tahunanui RMP, I can't make any absolute promises, but to me that seems a practical solution, to look at the option of being able to open up those parks further.
Councillor Rollo.
Thank you, Mayor Nick, and thank you, team. When I email Andrew White and tell him that the staff have got good feedback, I really mean it, because the community have seen a very well-performing council team on this, so congratulations on that. I just wanted to ask a quick question, and it may require the landfill to come along. I'm aware that come July 1 that the cost of dumping this material in the landfill goes up. Have those costings been presented in the report, or is there potential that with those costings occurring come July 1, if we still haven't done anything, that the cost will go up?
Yes, it will go up on July 1, as far as we're aware, yeah.
And do we have a percentage in how much that may be? Sorry for looking so far into the future.
If I may, we don't expect to have completed this work this year, but this financial year, so before July, so we have factored in those increased costs into that $5.8 million.
Okay. Councillor Stella.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. I did send a question through earlier about implications for the landfill, to which I received a reply, so thanks for that. But I wonder, it might be useful if Nigel could just speak to the practical implications if the material was to be taken to landfill 16,000 tonnes. It would be good to know what proportion of the annual sort of material taken to landfill that is. There would have to be extra staff and equipment, and what might be the ETS implications is the landfill. Will that change, for example, our unique emissions factor for that year, and what implications there might be that we should consider?
Through the chair, 16,000 tonnes is about 20% of the additional material for the landfill, so it's a significant amount of material that we would be receiving. Would it change our emission factor? We don't believe it would change our emission factor. It would increase the overarching emissions by a small amount, by 20%, because we would obviously be putting 20% more material in. But I don't see that as having a material effect on the landfill or on the costs associated with landfilling. In terms of the practical aspects of managing the material, we are in conversation with NCC in regard to receiving this material. We are developing a separate section of airspace for that material so that we can receive it as a separate activity, and we'll have two separate tip heads going at that time so that we don't interfere with the acceptance of municipal solid waste during that period of time. For us, one of the biggest concerns we've had is that when you put sawdust or another material like that in the landfill, it'll obviously collapse over time. So we need to be careful about where it would go in the landfill so that it doesn't destabilise the front of the landfill. And hence we are developing airspace at the back of the landfill to allow for us to accept it in that zone. So from my perspective, when we looked at this initially, we were worried whether we could accept it or couldn't under the rules for our contaminant codes. We investigated that and we found that we could. So that was ticked off that one. Secondly, we looked at whether or not this material was considered light material or not. We investigated that and we're confident that it's not considered light material. So it will be accepted as general waste essentially, and the costs. And obviously then we needed to make sure that we managed it appropriately when it came in, which we've got a plan for that as well. And those costs are included in the NCC's budgets, is my understanding.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Skinner.
Thank you for that. And while we've got the experts here, I know this is a topic that came up last term and we did well doing the testing and trying to ascertain what was in the sawdust, whether it was just the odd timber plank or fence post in there amongst the sawdust or so forth. And I understand there's areas, it's not all the sawdust is contaminated, there's portions of it, I understand. Well, I'm happy to be corrected. But when I look at the tables on page 132, talking about where it breaks down what the contaminants are, and you've got arsenic, boron, copper, PCP, chromium, etc. And some of those are naturally occurring. Some of those, maybe not in this case, but in the area, some of those you'd find higher levels just on a sports field or in your own vegetable garden if you had a few fence posts around or tannalised timber laying around. My concern is that we are potentially overreacting or being overly cautious. So just to put my mind at ease and understanding, when I look at those two tables, table 3.3 has the mean contaminants found for arsenic, boron, copper, etc. And a reminder, those can naturally occur in all sorts of environments. But then we've also got 3.4 showing the remediation targets. So when I look at those figures, you've got like arsenic, for example, 36 milligrams per kg found, ranging from 4 milligrams to 138. And then remediation target is 20. So I assume that's what we're trying to get it down to. For me, it doesn't sound like many of these are very high. I know it's a tough science and you've got all sorts of things. And there's some you definitely don't, in organics and inorganics, you don't want in the soils. But saying that, they don't look very high to start with. Am I reading that wrong?
So I think the question is, are these levels within acceptable levels for council?
Well, for example,
we're 100% confident that there is a significant amount of treated material in this sawdust pile. In terms of the technical questions about levels, whether it's significant or not, I think possibly Paul Walker might be a better person to answer the detailed questions. But from a high level perspective, I feel very confident that this material is not good for the environment or for the people here.
Maybe that's Mr.
I think it's good to get the question for Paul, but I would draw attention to the table on page 132. It is not for the sawdust and the waste, but is for the underlying sand. The earlier report was the one that carried the level of contamination, and they were above the national guidance. So I just think councillors need to be clear what this report was saying to us. Well, how much sand do we have to take out with it, as well as the sawdust that we know is contaminated? And I'm just a bit worried that councillors are misinterpreting that as being the material, the main material, rather than the supplementary material.
Again, if maybe that's Mr. Walker can answer. And so just to clarify, for example, arsenic at 36 found, and we're going to bring it down to 20, and then the likes of copper, we want to bring it down to 60 milligrams per kg, but it's only 6 milligrams per kg mean in the testing, and for the same with PCPs.
So welcome.
The high what we were trying to reach what may be deemed as safe, it's actually below that already, unless I'm reading those data wrong. I know I've raised this last term because I thought we were overreacting, being overly cautious, because the same levels or greater levels we would find quite acceptable in a residential property or even on a playing field. You'd hear, obviously it's a more sensitive area, we're suddenly throwing $6 million to remove something which we would find quite acceptable almost anywhere else.
I think that's incorrect, and I think it's incorrect because the results that you're
I'm after this officers to answer.
Sure.
That.
But I'm just reading what's actually in the report.
I've read
in the underlying sand.
Oh, due respect, I'm after officer response. Thank you. I'm not trying to be.
Who would be the technical expert who could address the questions and clarify that?
I'm happy to take that one.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, the remediation drivers are predominantly arsenic and to a lesser extent boron. So we are not looking to remediate sand or sawdust specifically to target copper or chromium. It is the arsenic numbers, particularly in the sawdust, where you'll see peak concentrations of up to 380, so significantly higher than allowable levels. The underlying sand, as you've pointed out, there is a mean of 36, but that still remains above both background and ecologically significant levels. So even on an average basis, those numbers would not be acceptable. This environmental discharge, which is what would happen if the sea was allowed to wash that away, would not be acceptable.
Does that address your question, Councillor Skinner?
Thank you for that. I mean, they still seem low, like some of those numbers. I'm not sure where the 380 came from arsenic. You have to clarify the RC. We got mean of 36, a range of 4 to 138, but I might be reading it wrong.
So in table 3.2, the range of arsenic is from number of 36 samples in sawdust is a range of 9 to 380 milligrams per kilogram, with a mean of 78.
So
it's important to know.
Yes, I'm seeing table 3.3, and I'm seeing arsenic range from 4 to 138.
Yeah, that's in the underlying sand.
Okay, so, and the sawdust is greater.
Correct.
Okay. And just to clarify those numbers, that all arsenic and boron, which we use a lot for a lot of things, arsenic and boron is 4 to 138 on the sand, and the remediation, looking at getting it down to 20, that doesn't seem like a great reduction.
Can I just clarify a question to you?
To me, it doesn't seem like overly concentrated elements. And once again, arsenic and boron, I mean, they're not good. But then they're also, once again, it might be for the other staff to answer. We enable, we're not enable, it's wrong word. It occurs in a lot of our both home and commercial and recreation reserves. Those occur fruiting over the fence posts banged into the ground. So I'm just feeling we're getting a little bit over.
But you would not be allowed to discharge that volume of material into the environment with those concentrations.
Thank you.
Could you just clarify the table 3.3 dealing with the samples for the underlying sand? Is it for the purposes of determining how much of the sand you need to take out, as well as the wooden contaminated waste that has the high levels? I interpreted that being the purpose of table 3.3. The judgment call about whether the overall waste, sawdust and wood waste needs to go needs to be on the basis of the information in table 3.2. Do I have that correct?
That's correct.
I see. Thank you. I see 3.2.
Councillor Pakipaki.
So just to, and it may be answered later on. Sorry to press this, but we're spending a lot of money, and obviously we don't want anything leaching into an environment we don't want to get into. But a lot of things we have runoff, etc. from, and some of these things do break down, some things don't break down. I still think that these numbers, there's not a great difference between what we're trying to get it down to. It's not completely cleaning it, and I also wonder whether we're starting a precedent where just about any place to dig up a clod of dirt, you'll find numbers varying around these figures potentially, and we get into a bit of a frenzy, whether it be Trafalgar Park, whether it be Pioneer Park, whether it be the Back Beach, or whether it be down here in the parking lot here before we put a playground in.
Yes, Hannah?
Well, I'm not sure if that was a question, but the difference, sorry, I didn't mean to, the difference is that this is an actively eroding area. So we have certainly taken that into consideration. We've actually conducted testing on the other sites that we know that the same sawdust has been used. And the difference is that it's actively being impacted by water on the daily and disseminating into the environment.
Any further questions? I'm going to have the opportunity for debate separately. Councillor Pakipaki.
Mr. Chair, I guess I will leave I'm quite a layperson in terms of the science behind this, so I'll acknowledge that and just leave that for the experts to advise. We've just come off the Waimea Inlet management strategy, discussing that. Do we know if that strategy? I actually can't recall anything. Is there recommendations from that strategy, or has been identified in that that this has been identified as something of great or grave concern?
We have consulted with Friends of the Haven and other organisations that are actively involved in the Waimea Inlet strategy, and they're supportive of our preferred option.
Any further questions from colleagues? Can I just, and just want to try and keep reasonably informal, Councillor Rainey's had a discussion with our staff just about refining the wording on recommendation 2. I'm quite comfortable with that if our officers are quite comfortable. The key word in there is the ideally, and that is we're practical. We really want to try and maximise the number of car parks within the bounds of the preferred option. And I think that gives sufficient room. Can I just check with officers that they are comfortable with that amendment, that you can live with that, Andrew? Yes, so sorry, Pete.
I would rather take an estimated cost of 5.8 million out. The reason being that kind of indicates that the design will be contingent on keeping to that budget, whereas what I'm trying to achieve is getting a car park that tries to keep to the original number of cars.
Can I?
And given that the difference between 5.8 and 6.1 and the overall scheme of things, and that the government will be paying the larger proportion of this cost, I think we
in our hope. The only bit, as I understand, and can I just check with this with the Chief Executive and Andrew? The key decision that we're being asked to make about the Te Hunanui contamination problem is the preferred option. The paper is quite plain. That we're actually not going to do anything in terms of the actual physical work without coming back to council, and that between myself and Nigel, we've got a challenge ahead in trying to maximise the amount of government money. My expectation is then after we do that, we will need to come back with it. My preference, and I'm just trying to think how we make the wording of the recommendations, and that is, but we need to be absolutely transparent with the government that if we want to spend another couple $100,000 on expanding the number of car parks, that's entirely appropriate, but it will be our cost. What I'd like to do, if I could, would be to give the clear signal to officials that that's our preference, get us to go away and see what scale of funding we can secure from the government, and then come back with a revised paper, but with your original amendment, Pete, giving the clear intent to the officers that if cost was a barrier to meeting that objective of ideally not reducing any in car parks, then you'll transparently identify that. So I just think removing the sums at this point is not, I think we give the clear signal to our chief executive officers that that's our preference. And if it's another 100 or a couple of $100,000 to do that, I'm hoping it's going to be a smaller rather than greater, that we signal that. But I'm not going to feel comfortable going to the government and saying that they've got to meet that bit. I think we're going to have a challenge enough my ambition would be to try and get this done this winter. Every month, year that it is there, there's further risk of it being eroding, and of course there's the cost of forever protecting the bund. So Pete, with that a bit of understanding, can we leave the numbers as they were, but with the clear intent that when they come back next time, if to meet that objective of maintaining the number of car parks, council is quite open to getting some financial numbers around that.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, so let's go with the original amendment that Pete put forward that's in the red and leaving the budget numbers there. The other advantage of that is that I'm wanting the engagement with the government to occur as quickly as possible, because actually the window for us trying to get this piece of work done this winter, I think, is incredibly challenging. It's the ideal, it's the goal, but it's very challenging. Okay. So we're not going to change the dollars, we're just going to do the original.
Before, though, it needs to be changed because it's talking about establishing a smaller alternative car park. So we need to change the wording.
Yeah, so let's, and establishing an equivalent car park.
Ideally established.
And ideally establishing an equivalent car park, just so that we've got the wording in consistency with the motion. So all I'm asking our officers to do is just to clarify the wording to make sure it's consistent and to keep momentum of the meeting. I was wondering whether the Te Huni Liaison Council would be prepared to move the 6 resolutions that we have before us, but allowing a bit of word scoping. And Pete, with your amendment, would you be prepared to be the seconder? So the motion's been moved and seconded. I'm just leaving the Chief Executive to do the wordsmithing of the motions and now open to debate. Again, I thank the team for the work. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I've
jumped
got some questions.
I've got questions from the Deputy Mayor.
Mainly around the word ideally, which is just in terms of, I think it's really important that we understand when we're saying, what are you reading that as we're willing to give up in this area to maximise the size of the car park? Is it like, are we giving you remit for greater vegetation loss? I support the intention, but I want to make sure that between officers and the governance table, we have understanding of what ideally means in this context. So I guess the question is, what is your understanding of what ideally means in this context?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Rohan, through you, Mayor Nick. My understanding of that would be that we have a reserve management plan for Te Hunanui Beach, which has some pretty clear policy positions around managed retreat and all that sort of thing, and around vegetation management. So we would work to that as our key policy piece. Ideally for me means that we will do our very best within the confines of that reserve management plan to achieve this objective, which has been stated so clearly by some of the elected members today.
Wonderful, thank you.
Councillor Rennie.
Thanks. I just want, management plans are one thing. Nature will have the last word on all of this, of course. And it's remarkable how that area has changed over the last 10 years. Indeed, I organised an event on that corner, I think it was about 2005. We had live bands on the beach. We had 5,000 people and a large stage and PA systems and everything down there on the beach. It went off like a rocket. It's all completely gone. That area's just completely gone now. It's drifted off. So I am very aware of that. What I think that we have here is a suite of recommendations that indicates quite clearly, and I would like to acknowledge the hard work that's gone from staff, that we are really interested in what the final outcome is going to be. We want to keep this concept of being one of the leading areas for kite surfing and foiling in the country to be as potent as possible, because indeed it is a jewel of the jewel, which is Tahunanui Beach. So I know staff are very aware of that now. We've made that clear in what we've just discussed this morning. And also, as nature will find its own way, I do know that kite surfers will find the shortest distance between the car park and where they have to launch. So regardless of what paths you put in, there will be an actual path that will occur. So thanks, I do support what we've got.
Thank you. So I'm going to take, now we think, no further questions? The motion's been moved by Councillor Rollo. It's been seconded by Councillor Rainey, and it's open for debate. If there's no, Councillor Binge, and then Councillor Skinner. Sorry, Tim.
Thank you. I think we've got the solution. If Pete Rainey would organise a rock concert on top of the sawdust, within a few years it'll be gone.
Unbelievably, the concert that we did was called The Sand Pit.
I just want to take up a little bit of Councillor Skinner's point, in that if we took a bulldozer at low tide and pushed all of this shit into the sea, it would wash away and it would be below the allowable limit. Now, my parents' generation and my generation in my younger years, we did some horrific things to the environment. We were encouraged to use chemicals and stuff that we should never have used, and they've since been stopped. And I think what Tim was trying to say is that, are we opening a Pandora's box here by saying this is the limit, and if we discover this, because I mean, we've just filled in a huge area beside the airport at the bottom of Quarantine Road. It took them months and months to try and compact it to the level that's required. And that was a sawmill since forever. And I mean, I think if you started going around digging holes, testing for the stuff, you'd find it everywhere. And yeah, I've only just, Tim's comments have just made me think about it, but are we setting a standard that we have to keep up here? It could be horrific.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Councillor Binge. I strongly believe we're going down the wrong pathway on this. I myself completely avoid any sort of those chemicals in my own veggie garden. I take great effort to make sure I'm not using tannalised timber, etc., etc. But then on the other side of the coin, I've just built a cabin, and you are using tannalised timber to protect the wood, etc. And yes, these contaminants would be found far higher if I dug a hole just out in the pavement out here, far higher if I dug a hole in Trafalgar Park, far higher if I dug a hole just about anywhere. I think we're overreacting. I understand the sediment here is we've got a wee bit of different dynamics here. We've got erosion happening and movement happening. But on the other side of the coin, I see things, some of these other chemicals indicated and tested for the PCPs, etc., are all very well already below safe standards. And as Mr. Walker quite rightly pointed out, it's the arsenic and boron. And I think we're overreacting when it comes to the arsenic and boron. Obviously, it's not something you want floating around in your environment, but we have in our environments in all sorts of areas, both naturally and unnaturally. I think, and this is something I pressed last term when we had that erosion happening on that car park, and I sent the odds with the Environment Committee, I was going for an active decision on protecting that erosion rather than a retreat. And I know you can't always stop the movement of those sands, but we were very effective many years ago with around the front beach, etc. With engineering was very successful in stopping that erosion and movement of sands. And when it's spending $6 million, I think we should be looking at the bigger picture and protecting an area, both for commercial and recreational, because that area is eroding very quickly and it's causing some great costs to a community. And I think we should be changing our stance of retreat to active erosion control and put some measures in there to prevent that erosion. That would stop further any of this sort of unveiling of contaminants, and also protect that area for parking, recreation, etc. And we've got a lot of businesses operating there as well as community organisations, and we're already spending a lot of money investing in the area. Currently, that's on that side of it. On the other side, as Councillor Binge articulated very well, yes, I believe that we are opening more than a Pandora's box. We would be able to point the finger at a lot of places which may seem safe now, may not be safe soon, and it will just get out of control. So I think we have overreacted on this. I guess the erosion is a big issue and we should do what we can, but this is going to be far more than $6 million. And I think what we're doing here is overreacting on the arsenic and the boron. As I see, the contaminants are very low. Below in the sand and the sawdust, it was a bit higher just in those contaminants. But I think we should be seeking other measures, and those other measures are protecting that area from erosion rather than eroding it ourselves by digging, there's quite a few cubic tons there, removing it ourselves and then have to refill it. I think we'd be coming back possibly wondering what we've refilled it with. But yes, I'm very concerned at how we've taken a pathway, I think, which is not going to resolve. It's just going to create more issues, great expense, and probably more ecological damage to the area. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Skinner. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very supportive of the resolutions here. I'm grateful we don't have Councillor Caligula sitting around the table, but I do think some of those thoughts may be coming in that coastal marine environments are complex and ever-changing. We know that Te Hununui Beach has changed significantly. We are not going to beat erosion in this situation. I think there's a little bit of a sense that ignorance is bliss, and ignorance is bliss until the chickens come home to roost, and they have in this situation. The difference in the levels of contamination in the sand at Te Hununui Beach and the dirt beneath the footpath is that no one's playing in the dirt beneath the footpath. This is an active, beloved area where we know we have an issue with rules that we have not set ourselves, with well-established acceptable limits that we are well over in a number of areas, with toxins and chemicals that are not only harmful to human health, but to the natural environment. This is not an ideal situation. I don't think anyone wants to be spending $5.8 million to pick up the pieces of the mistakes of the past. I'd feel very bad if 50 years from now, someone has to spend more than that to tidy up mistakes we made. And that's where our focus needs to be, is ensuring that the actions we take around this table isn't sowing the seeds of future damage. And ignoring this problem would be doing that. I think what we've got here is a well thought out, and I want to acknowledge the huge amount of work that's gone into this solution. I appreciate the efforts of Councillor Rainey, Councillor Rollo in shaping this resolution to make sure that we're also recognising the core role it currently plays as access to active recreation in our marine environment. And I think that if we can get an outcome where we do maintain as much access as possible, whilst also not deluding ourselves into thinking that we can continue to build a car park on the top of the dunes, which we know are being washed away at such a significant rate. There is a compromise solution here, and it's one that we've worked towards. But the unfortunate situation is when you know you've got a problem and you know that problem is active and you know that you're currently having to spend significant amount of money to avoid that problem getting worse, actually investing and hoping very strongly that central government comes to the table in a significant way on this. This is the cost-effective outcome in the long run, because to spend the money that we're currently spending to stop that erosion getting worse, to stop releasing that dangerous material into our environment is not a long-term cost-effective solution. And so I think we probably will find more that we find them all the time, actually. And every infrastructure project, there's always a weird thing that we end up coming up against, whether it be the tar down when we were doing the Hastings Street upgrades and other issues. The morally just and responsible thing to do is to respond to the information that we have, to ask questions to ensure that we have as much information as possible in progressing these things. And in this case, we've got the information in front of us. We've now done a whole lot of work to figure out what the right solution is. And I think the sooner we can get on and do this, the better.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I'm just going to make some comments from the chair in response to some of the challenge. When we come to these sorts of issues, there will be lots of different political perspectives around issues of chemicals and whether they're dangerous and the like. In my experience, you must follow the science. The moment you move off that science, you're in trouble. Now, that science has generated a set of guidelines. Those guidelines tell us that the levels of arsenic and boron are significantly above the levels of safe. And I am not prepared, as the mayor of the city, to ignore that science and sort of pretend this problem does not exist. I do not think that is what a responsible body does. I think we've got an extra onus in that I believe Te Hunanui Beach is one of the most precious jewels in the crown for this community. And when I go down there, as I have often over the summer, and I see hundreds of children Mokopuna playing in their beach, making their sandcastles, can I live with that thousands of tons of contaminated material being spread into that area where those kids are? I'm sorry, this is a no-brainer. You have to do the right thing. I'm further concerned that some have confused the different information and tables that we have. We've been presented with data about, quite properly, not just a little bit of sand, not part of it. Even if we take the average samples for the arsenic and boron are significantly above the safe levels, with a table where our council staff are trying to make the decision that some of the boron and arsenic has seeped out of the sawdust into the sand. And they're trying to make a responsible decision, well, how much of the sand do we need to take out? And people have misinterpreted those levels, which encouragingly are not as bad, but have influenced the very responsible report that tells us how much total material we should take out. So I'm one of those that is very supportive of the recommendations. Now, I hear alternatives put forward as what we should try and do is build some sort of erosion protection structure. Now, I've been associated with a few of those and seen them occur. They are mega millions. Even in the earlier discussion that we had about where you might go with Rocks Road, anything that you do in a highly coastal environment, particularly one that is many kilometres in length, the idea that you can just protect a little short stretch, the 200 odd metres where this contaminated material is, does not work because guess what? It just comes around the corner. The only way you could conceivably look at an engineering structure is that if you're going to try and put an engineering structure over a long length of the beach, and I seriously say that is impractical. I ask people to read the professional report we've received from Tonkin and Taylor that has kicked the tyres on a number of alternatives, and I don't think we have any choice. My last point, the $5.8 million is a big ask. I don't think this council and the ratepayers can afford this without government support. The government has created the contaminated sites remediation site to help us deal with orphan sites of this sort, where ideally we would hold those responsible that had originally distributed the contaminated soil there. The next challenge, if we approve this option, is to work our butts off to try and maximise that level of support that we get from government so that we can get on and do the clean-up. Councillor Rollo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And can I just quickly acknowledge that I would like to seek a formal division on this vote. So I'll just start by saying that. And it's an interesting thing that we're debating here. And I'm sure that the Max and that the rest of the media are watching this with great urge, because it might be that the clickbait that they can make it as the front page of the newspaper next week. But I'd just like to start by saying that far too many elected members get a lot of credit for these things, and all the credit on what's happened here must go to the staff, because the staff found an issue, and we've heard that we've gone and dug holes and we've found the sawdust. Well, actually, the truth is we're losing 3.8 metres of it per week straight into the water. And if you say you care about the environment, allowing that to happen is very hypocritical. And so look, the staff have gone on, done jobs. I've heard from people, including other councillors, that actually most people think the work's already been done. And Mel Courtney reminds me of that often. And I need to apologise to him because I've just quickly worked out that when this work happens, we're going to lose some trees. So my commitment to him is I'll get down there with Mel and we'll replant a tree in his honour when we can replant them again. So that's for you, Mel. It's very interesting, though, that we're doing this situation because I note that we have a reserve management plan that was last in the early 2000s, and we're going to have far more of these issues. It's been well debated, and I think it's worth highlighting the need, an active need to create up-to-date policy for work that may happen in these coastal areas and the Tahuna area once again. And so I'd just like to, commend the community who have got right behind this. I was scrolling Facebook last night and I looked back and I put in Tahuna Sawdust and there was people posting from even as early as 2018 just asking. The council obviously don't care, they're allowing this to happen. Well, I'm sure today we can go back and tell those people actually we do care. Someone allowed this to happen generations ago when we are told to be good ancestors, and we're allowing that this environment will do its due diligence for the generations to come. Thank you.
Any other contributions? I'll put the resolutions. Those that are in favour, resolutions 1 to 5.
Just for division.
Oh, I'm sorry. So a division has been requested, and so I'll ask the Chief Executive to carry a division on the resolutions as one. I'm assuming it's easiest is if there's just on all them together.
Resolutions as one. Councillor Anderson.
Aye.
Councillor Benj. Aye. Councillor Brand.
Aye.
Councillor Courtney. Aye. Councillor Hodgson.
Aye.
Councillor Pakipaki.
Tautoko.
Councillor Rainey.
Aye.
Councillor Rollo.
Aye.
Councillor Sanson.
Aye.
Councillor Skinner.
No.
Councillor Stallard.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor.
Aye.
Mayor Nick.
Aye.
Carried.
We've done it now. We'll take a quick 5-minute break. Council resume at 11:30. of juggling of agenda to be able to make things work. With the pace that we've made this morning, we're inevitably are going to require the time I indicated at the beginning of the meeting of 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. tomorrow. And I think, and I've even given consideration, I don't want the time around the 6-month reports to be constrained. They are a new mechanism that we're developing. And so it's my intention to take items 12, 13 and 14, the late item that came in on the supplementary agenda on the car sharing, the infrastructure 6-month review and the environment 6-month review to be deferred till tomorrow, those 3 items from 11 till 1, for us to work hard to deal with items 11, 15 and 16, and then to move into some of those gutsy items that we have on the confidential agenda. So we come to item 11 with Andrew on the Community Investment Fund upgrade. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks again, Mayor Nick. I'll just hand over to Mr. Preston Thomas, who will present what is a relatively straightforward procedural report.
Good morning, councillors. This is simply an update on the last funding round of these events fund. Sorry, not the events fund, the Community Investment Fund for November. I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions, councillors? Firstly, Councillor Rollo.
Sorry, Mayor Nick, I should have presented this at the start. I just want to note that I'm on the board of 2 charities that receive funding in the latest round.
Is that contained on your register of interests?
Yes.
Good, that's covered. Questions from colleagues? Everybody's very comfortable with that? So am I. I'll move from the chair the recommendations that are contained to receive the report and the minute. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Pakipaki. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. We come to item number 15 on the agenda, the Plan Change 29 hearing panel. Page 209 of the agenda, recommendations 1 to 6. And we're in your hands, Mandy, but the Deputy Mayor would like the floor.
Yeah, just to note, myself and Councillor Brand have discussed, and just for any avoidance of doubt, whilst we could engage in decision making on this, we've both decided to step away from the table just to make sure that there's no perception of bias in this.
Okay, Mandy.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Yeah, just take the report as read and happy to answer any questions. I may have our new manager of planning and development join us, but just with the shuffle around with timeframes, she isn't quite ready. So, yeah, she might join us soon, hopefully.
Good as gold. Any questions from colleagues? Let's start with a question from Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair. Kia ora, Mandy. I sent my question through in advance. I note in the report there is a number of options, including to appoint 2 additional independent commissioners. But I'm just wondering if we were considering going to 5, why the option to appoint 1 additional independent commissioner and 1 additional councillor commissioner wasn't really kind of considered, just given that there are, I think, 4 of us around the table who are also qualified commissioners.
Yeah, through the chair, I didn't mention that in the report. Of course, it is a valid option because the feedback that I understood it is they, with the workload, the panel needed, I guess, extra experienced help and potentially expertise help as well with the natural hazard topics. So that's why I suggested independent panelist.
Okay. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Through to Mandy, Officer Mandy. Mandy, it's a usual practice to have an uneven number of commissioners. In the case of stalemate, So my question really is, will the chair have the casting vote to sort of avoid that situation when there's 4 and not 3?
Yeah, through the chair, that we can certainly identify that in the terms of reference for the panel, should that be needed. It's often not that you actually do get a stalemate. But yeah, for those circumstances where that appears, we can make that clear.
Thank you.
Sorry to catch you on the hop by doing a bit of a juggle of the agenda.
Yeah, through the chair. If I could...
So can I just ask a question in respect of, Mandy, the resolutions? Sorry.
Introduce Claire because she's the new member of staff.
Oh, Claire.
Yeah, I just would like, if the chair doesn't mind, just introduce elected members to Claire Piper, who is our new manager of planning and development. So she looks after the plan writing team as well as city development teams. She's only been with us a couple of weeks. So it comes from Christchurch City Council, but really pleased to have her in that role.
Welcome to the team. Really looking forward to having your professional help. Wishing you the best with the role. And the first bit is that sometimes council knows the timetable around a bit and catches you on the hop. Can I just follow through on the question from Councillor Courtney, and that is it automatic, or do we need to formally end up adding additional commissioner, make plain that we're happy in exceptional circumstances for the chair of the panel to have a casting vote?
I think it would be preferable to have it in the terms of reference for the panel, so it's very clear for all panel members. Yes.
And it is. Good. I just indicate that I've got a great deal of confidence in all 3 of the commissioners that we appointed. I hear the advice, and of those of us that are on the task force working with the storm recovery, one of the really tricky questions in the revision with Plan 29 is getting this geotechnical risk thing right. And my view is that with so many submissions on those points, it makes good sense for us to consider appointing an additional commissioner to provide some more expertise in that space. My view of this is that if the new plan is too conservative around that risk, you're going to eliminate opportunities for housing and make housing more expensive and more people without homes. If they are too liberal, we're going to get more examples of a storm event, and it actually requires really good professional judgment and input to hear those submissions and getting that correct. And that's why I'm pretty supportive of the recommendations that we have to extend the panel. And I'm assuming that's the key expertise that we're looking for as additional Mandy.
That's correct, yeah.
Councillor Skinner.
Sorry, just expanding your comments about liberal and conservative. Is that referring to who would be or may be on the panel? Is that what you're saying?
No, my comment with respect to the liberal and conservative is that in the plan rules, you've got you can take quite a liberal approach around geotechnical risk, i.e. you don't put many restrictions, or you can take a very conservative approach and say you're not allowed to have development in any of those areas. Now, it actually requires a huge amount of good balanced judgments around getting that balance correct. My view is if you are too liberal, then you are going to result in development in areas that subsequently may slip, causing substantive loss and expense for both them and for the city. If you are too conservative, you're going to have very large tracts of Nelson being prohibiting development. So we're around the management of geotechnical risk. We want a nice balanced approach to balance those through. The only way, in my view, you get good balanced approach is getting the very best science and technical skills. And that was the reference to my comment, Councillor Skinner.
Okay, I'm just a little bit cautious here when we're talking about the views of a panel. I'd like to think it wouldn't be based on liberal or conservative assessment, but more on what they felt was the right decision from the submissions received and the rules that they abide by. But we're just getting a little bit of we're sort of just trying to guide what the panel should be coming to. You're sort of showing a hand of what you want the result to be, where this is really a submission process for the public, and we seem open-minded panel we won't be going in there with either a liberal or conservative view, but we'll be going in there to make the best decision, the right decision from the consultation. So I just caution a bit wary of those comments made by the chair. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bench and then Councillor Stella.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. I'm comfortable with it as it is. This is a huge job. Every person you add, it will take more time. And when we talked about this last time, I asked the question, do these 3 commissioners have access to the staff? Can they ask questions of the staff? Can they get expert advice? And the answer was they can. And I would far rather they went to the staff and got advice from staff or other experts, and maybe more than one expert on a particular thing to make up their mind, and put one expert for one particular thing on the panel. And when it comes to what parts of Nelson are at risk from the future, surely we've got most of that. I mean, you know, we've got a lot of that, and it doesn't take much imagination or to see if it was worse where it was going to go. So I just think it will make the job harder. I would rather it stayed with the 3 that there is, and that they use our staff and others as their expertise, because I think the job will get done quicker and better.
I think the question in that for Mandy and Claire is, do you think by having an additional commissioner it will make the job harder?
Short answer is no.
Councillor Stella?
Thanks, Mayor Nick. Is one of the considerations about having a additional panel member is managing workload, is one factor that's been considered the ability to have concurrent sessions, having 4 commissioners, and is that a fact? Is that something they might do? One, say they can have a theme on hazards and a different theme running concurrently, if that's going to benefit the process to speed it up and so on.
Yeah, that's certainly an option that panel can consider, depending on how it could be split. So, but the main thing we're trying to make it very easy for is the submitters to attend a hearing panel and not necessarily double up their time, or so that will be the main thing, to try and work out the administration of the hearings, is to make them run as smoothly as possible, that people don't have to keep coming back and forth depending on the topics split.
Thanks. Any other questions? I'll move the recommendations 1 to 6 from the chair. Is there somebody that's prepared to second those? Thanks, Councillor Skinner. Any debate that members would like to have? I just recite my earlier comments, and that is Plan Change 29 is one of the most important, challenging jobs that our council has this term. It is a very significant rewrite of our rules, and there are dozens of issues that we need to get right. If there was any lessons that we had from the August 22 storm, it's the tens of millions of dollars as well as huge heartache that comes as a consequence of allowing development in areas that are prone to geotechnical risk. We know from the submissions that there are a significant number of submissions and refinement that may be needed in those provisions. I think it's a wise choice for us to extend the commission and to get some extra expertise, not just in the technical side, but actually in the way in which we craft those rules to better manage that risk. I think it's important when we're writing a plan to understand and write in doing those rules, you're not doing a full geotechnical assessment. You're deciding on the rules about what geotechnical assessment would be required in particular areas. And so you're deciding which of the areas where the higher risk is, where those extra assessments would be. I want to make sure we get that right. And that's why I think the recommendation that we have makes good sense for our council in doing this incredibly important and complex job.
Can I just point out a slight amendment to 3, which is just clarifying the chair to have a casting vote?
I think it's appropriate, given Councillor Courtney's question earlier, for us just to make that explicitly clear. Any further debate? That being the case, I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you to our staff. We now come to item 16, invite Susan and Nikki around Wasney Terrace Railway Reserve.
Thank you, and thank you for your indulgence bringing this through as a supplementary agenda. This was some resolutions that were passed at the hearings panel, and it also requires consent of the council. So happy to take any questions.
Councillor, this is a paper that has come in supplementary and in late, and for those reasons I just give a bit more indulgence to councillors to get their head around it. That is, we usually have a bit of a convention, they give heads up on questions, but when they're later papers, I like to give councillors quite a lot more scope. So any questions at all on the recommendations on the supplementary paper?
Happy to move.
Councillor Skinner's quite comfortable and happy to move. Councillor Sanson is happy to second? No? I'll take a question from Councillor. I'll take note of the very helpful Tim. Take a question from Rachel and move from there.
Thanks. Sorry. The supplementary agenda was around the car policy. Was the this matter we're dealing with as well? Was it also late?
It was through the chair. Yes, it was. So there were two papers. There was a draft car sharing policy and the consent for easements for Wasney Terrace and Railway Reserve that were included in the supplementary paper.
I'm happy to second. I was on the hearings
The only thing I do want to check is that, look, I'm a stickler for process. Can I just be reassured that all councillors did get a copy of the supplementary agenda item, have had a chance to look at it? People are. Pete, did you? Because if that is not the case, and people haven't had a chance, not that I've got any difficulty with it, I think it's quite comfortable, but if some councillors are indicating, Councillor Skinner and Sanson.
No,
You've seen it?
Yeah.
Everybody comfortable?
I think what threw me is that there isn't usually in the front of the agendas, it has the items listed, but it just went straight into the car policy. I'd seen it. I actually also chaired this hearings panel where we recommended it come here to council for approval, so I'm happy to second it.
Lovely, got us moved and seconded, everybody's comfortable. I just think there is a note for the governance team, when you do those supplementary agendas, make sure the items are listed on the top so that members can be familiar with what's coming through there. Been moved and seconded, any debate? No debate, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And carried. Now it is my intention to take the resolution in the general agenda on moving into confidential business. Is the Deputy Mayor is happy to move. It sets out the reasons and the resolutions under item 16 for the exclusion of the public. Is someone happy to move second the resolution that's been moved by the Deputy Mayor? Thank you, Councillor Courtney. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against say no. That is carried. We're just going to take a 1 minute recess to give the chance to reset the systems and to clear the room.